Hello and welcome to Twisted Britain, a podcast on true crime written with a sprinkle of the weird and macabre. And your hosts are me, Bob Dale.
And me, Ali Downey.
Good evening, Ali Downey. How are you?
I am fantastic. It's a fabulous day down in Bournemouth today.
Yes, you're in Bournemouth. I am in the Settle Inn, as always. This is our second attempt at recording this evening.
Yeah,
we'll
it's
work it
become
out
the
one
new
day.
normal.
It's become the new normal. Me struggling with technology while you sit and watch me from afar. Thanks for that.
Yeah, love it.
How's Bournemouth?
Bournemouth's amazing. It was a lovely day today. It's so much sunnier down here.
It's really windy here. Really fucking windy. I was for work at the airport today. Never mind why I was at the airport, but see, watching the planes come in when they're like ski whiff coming in. It's fucking scary.
Yeah. It's amazing. Anyway, I love watching that tire vaporization when they land.
Yeah, and I thought you were going to say you like watch. Have you seen that guy? What's his name? The aeroplane guy on YouTube that just goes to airports and films fucking planes coming in at weird angles. Never mind.
Yeah.
Let's go with Big Plane TV or some shit like that. Anyway, we shall move swiftly on to. I'm going to tell you a case this evening. That's been a wee while since we've done that.
It has, and this one's been coming for a wee while too.
Yeah, I promised to tell you a couple of weeks ago, and then something happened, and then last week we had the pleasure of the Stirling University True Crime Society joined us, which was a lovely night.
It was great. It was nice to have a completely captive audience.
Yeah, and they were good. They did some questions and answers stuff at the end, and it was good fun. There was a bit, what would you say, about 20 of them in? Maybe not quite that many, but something like that.
Yeah, there's about 20 of them in, but they said there was like 50 of them in the club. That's a big true crime club.
Yep, and we're going to get them back in another time, hopefully. But I thought I would tell you a tale this evening, as you say, one that's been in the post for a while. I've told you I was going to do it weeks ago. In true Bob fashion, though, I'd written, 2/3 to 3/4 of it a couple of weeks ago, and then we had to go back and reread my absolute fucking nonsense to finish the case this week. But never mind, we have a tale for you, Alistair. So and I shall tell you a tale.
Tell me a tale.
Tonight, I would like to tell you the tale of two men going up a mountain and one man coming back down.
You love a mountain story.
Do you know what? I do. I love the mountains, full stop.
Yeah.
And add in some mystery, a possible murder into the mix, and it's very me for a Twisted Britain story, I feel. The last mountain I covered was Everest, our friend. Oh, what was his name now? Name's escaped me. That tried to fly to Everest and climb it, and it wasn't huge
legend.
Crime, but his name will come to me. At
wasn't
some point,
hugely successful either.
Not at all. This mountain, however, I'm going to talk about this evening is ever so slightly closer to home. It's also very much smaller than Everest. I'm going to tell you this evening about the death of Edwin Rose on Goatfell on the Isle of Arran.
I've climbed it.
Have you? I was going to ask. That was literally my next words. I have never
climbed it. I've climbed it with my Annie Marguerite.
So it is the highest mountain on Arran. I thought I would tell a wee bit. There'll be people listening to this that have never been to Arran or know where it is. So I thought a wee bit about Arran before we get started. Good whiskey.
Great whiskey.
Great distillery tour as well. Arran is the 7th largest Scottish island, lying in the Firth of Clyde, only about 45 minutes on the ferry from the mainland. And as I say, I've had the pleasure of going a couple of times, once with my family and my brother when we were much smaller, once more recently for a stag do, where we partook in some of the very tasty whiskey that they have on offer. And I'm just literally about to go, and I know you've been. Have you climbed Goatfell? Is what I've written down here. But we've covered that already.
So don't worry.
Just the once?
Yeah, just the once.
So the interesting thing about the mountains on Arran is Arran's sometimes referred to as Scotland in miniature. And it was only during the research for this case that I understood why. I just thought it was because it was a tiny wee version of Scotland, which it is, but it's a lot more scientific than that. The tectonic fault line that runs through Scotland that makes the Highlands and the Lowlands runs directly through Arran. So it means that on the island itself, it has a highland and a lowland, almost in mimicking of the mainland.
Yeah.
And Goatfell lies in the mini highlands. We'll go with the mini highlands. And it stands at 2,800 feet, making it a Corbett in Scottish terms, which is a mountain between 2,000 and 3,000 feet tall, where a mountain over the height of 3,000 feet is a Munro. The hill itself is quite an imposing feature on the island. In fact, you can see it from the mainland. And you know me, I could quite happily talk about mountains for probably the entire of a podcast.
Well, you did during the Everest podcast.
And I'm about to
Maurice Wilson.
Maurice Wilson, thank you very much. Yes, the legend that is Maurice Wilson. Yeah, as I say, I could happily talk about mountains, and in that Everest bit, there was almost a bit about the mountain. I'm going to do the same. Obviously, we'll go on to talk about the crime that happens on the mountain later on. The last thing I would say about the mountain itself and its geography, now you'll be able to confirm this better than me, as I've not been up, is that it's one of these hills that's got kind of a recognised up and down path, and you don't stray from it. Like, it's got a route that you take.
Yeah.
And I make a point of that, saying that because sometimes if you go off the path, not in all Scottish mountains, but if you go off the path, sometimes you can find yourself more prone to a bit of bother, shall we say.
Yes.
And that is certainly the case with Goatfell. So the case I'd like to tell you about tonight is the Goatfell murder, the Arran mystery, the Arran murder. It gets a few different names depending on where you're looking at the sources. I've gone with the Goatfell murder just because I like the word Goatfell.
Yeah.
And it happened in the summer of 1889. Now, at this time, Arran was a destination holiday place. Not that it isn't now, but it would have been much more so in the Victorian age. People would have gone out on steamers from the Clyde and gone via Bute to Arran and background. You know, a mini cruise, I suppose.
Yeah, island hopping.
Yeah, just as their Victorian upper class holiday. So let me introduce you to two men who, before this summer, did not know each other. Edwin Rose and John Laurie. Edwin Rose was a clerk working in London, a banking clerk, a buildings clerk working in London, and he'd planned his summer holiday to travel up to Ardrossan, where he would get the ferry to Rothesay on Bute, where he'd base himself for a holiday between Bute and Arran, using the paddle steamer to travel to the bigger island of Arran for walking in the mountains. John Laurie, on the other hand, was a pattern maker in the ironworks in Spinburn in Glasgow. So, without taking him down too much, he was certainly the other end of the social spectrum than Edwin Rose was. But the two men would cross paths on the paddle steamer heading for Brodick on the Isle of Arran, which is the largest town there, where they had sought some residence. Edwin was on his holidays, and John was technically too, but he had another motive for visiting the island. He was there to get some time away from work, but he was also there chasing a lost love. An ex-girlfriend of his was to marry another man, and he's a wee bitty pissed off by it. So he was away to see what was going on with that.
Oh.
Yeah, but we'll carry on. Actually, that's the reason he's on Arran, is because of the woman. But very little of the fact that he's on the island for the woman takes precedent in the rest of the case. But it's really pertinent to the story because that's the reason why he went to Arran.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason why these two men happen to cross each other when they're on the ferry. Whilst they're on that ferry, they also make the acquaintance of two other men, and they form a seemingly weird boy band-esque troupe. So they spend a good few days together boating and walking, and I would hazard a guess at drinking and making merry together on the island.
Nice.
John Laurie, however, whilst travelling, introduced himself under a different name. He used the name John Annandale, and one can only presume he did that to stop the previous girlfriend hearing him about him being on the boat over. Small island life, I would imagine, news travels quite quickly.
All right, so it's less cute then if she absolutely didn't want to see him.
Yeah, it's definitely less cute than the initial awe insinuated. Because he was there as a jealous ex, basically.
Yeah, it's a little bit more stalkery than romantic.
Oh yeah, we're definitely on that level for sure. And weirdly though, I would say, just based on the reading that I'd done, his stalkeriness maybe moves away from her and like attaches himself to Edwin Rose. Like he seems to have made this really quick bond with somebody that he's met on a boat, and two other guys. The two other guys do leave slightly earlier, and I'll get to that in a bit. But he seems just to almost have gone, I went for this reason, but actually I've met this dude, and I'm like hanging on to him now. Anyway, that's just some side thoughts. 2 secs. Nice if you can help me out. Sorry.
You're grand.
So these four men on the boat take up a holiday residence together that I'm fairly certain was accommodation that John Annandale, John Laurie had sorted. I'm probably just going to go with John Laurie for the most of it, because he does introduce himself as John Annandale to different people, but he's tried under the name of John Laurie, and it's the one that I kind of went, well, that's him.
Yeah, that's his name.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it does. It nearly didn't fit through the bars.
No.
Either way, it doesn't matter which what I'm going to call them. They spent a few days in early July of 1889, and they seem to be having a nice time away. I will say that the two other men who are unnamed in this story, I'm sorry about that, because I couldn't get a definitive between the different readings I got as to what their names were, so I've just gone with the two other men.
Yeah.
They become a little bit slightly suspicious of John. It could be as simple as they had a bit of a bad feeling about him because there was definitely something going on. But I would also hazard a guess that there's probably a bit of a difference in social standings between the group of three, the two men and Edwin and John separately. I think there was probably some social class going on there. There was also some noise about how John had toothache the entire time he was there, so he was slightly distant. But either way, the two unnamed men had a bit of an uneasy feeling about John, and they had said to Edwin to be a bit wary of him. No specific, like, I think he's a threat, but just...
No, this guy's giving off weird vibes.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, totally. And the two gentlemen come to leave the island on the 14th of July, which is a few days before John would, certainly, and a long time before Edwin would. On this time, however, they warned Edwin to be on his guard. After the two left, John suggested that the pair of them, now that they were alone, could take on the summit of Goatfell, as the view from the top would be more than enough reason to climb the hill. And why do we climb hills?
Because they're there.
Because, as Edward Hillary once said, because they're there. And the challenge and the view and all the nonsense that goes with it, but predominantly because they're there. Apparently that was... he didn't mean to say that, he just said it. So in the early afternoon of the 15th of July, the pair set off to climb Goatfell. They were seen on the summit in the early evening by several other walkers. I think it was about 5 other people testified that they had seen both of them on the summit. This, however, was the last time that anyone would see Edwin Rose alive. Now, no one to this day knows what happened to Edwin Rose on the descent of that mountain, but we do know that John Laurie was seen later that evening after descending the mountain in the Corrie Hotel about 10 p.m. by himself, where he bought some beers and some whiskies to see him down the road to his lodgings in Broddock, which was about 6 miles away. I mean, a few travel cans is always a good plan.
One for the road.
One for the road, or in this case, several for the road. The only time it's not a good plan is possibly when you've committed a horrible murder, but we'll get to that bit in a bit. The landlady of the lodgings that the pair had been staying in said that by the morning the following day, both Edwin Rose and John Laurie's bags had been removed from the place and that he had absconded without paying. John Laurie was seen carrying bags to the pier in Brodick to board the early morning ferry off of the island. Cheese It by sea. I think this is the first Cheese It by sea we've had.
Yeah, I think it might be. We've had Cheese It by canal.
And we've had Cheese It by plane.
Yeah.
But I think this might be the Cheese It by sea, the first ever.
Yeah, we've had Cheese It by motorbike.
Maybe we need a list of methods of Cheese It. Somebody put a post up on it was either Instagram or Facebook that to knock the door and cheese it was called something in their town. I was like, I very much appreciate your use of the words cheese it there. One of the things he was seen with, a pair of the things that he was seen with were quite distinctive. That was Edwin Rose's jacket and his walking cane. And from here on, we don't really know what John Laurie does for the next couple of weeks. He must have returned to the mainland via Rothsay on Bute to collect all of his things. And then the next date that we hear of John Laurie is on the 31st of July, which is about 2 weeks later when he abruptly quits his job in Springburn. However, a few things had happened in the days between John leaving Arran and him quitting his job in Springburn. So let's go through them before we can say what we can about John's movements. Edwin Rose wasn't seen again. He was expected home in London on the 18th of July. His brother got a bit worried about the whereabouts of Edwin as he hadn't returned from his holidays on the day that he said he would. And unlike now, when we go into the hills or go off for a long walk, you let somebody know where you're going and you let them know when you get back. It's like kind of standard operating procedure, isn't it? Yeah. They obviously didn't have the options that we have now. And the first red flag of him being missing would have been him not returning on the day that he said he would. So his brother takes a wee trip to the island himself. He obviously hears on arrival to the island that his brother had gone up the mountain and hadn't been seen since. In fact, nobody knew the whereabouts of either men who had set off that day. So 2 things that I was thinking about while I was writing this. Why has nobody reported that they didn't see the other man? And is the reason for that the fact that the landlady went, or of the lodgings they were staying in Brodick, went, oh no, both sets of luggage went, so they must have both left?
Possibly.
It's the only reason I can think that nobody's gone looking for this man in 4 days. But then I suppose, why would you? If you assumed that he had left. But then loads of people had seen John on his own. Which I just, when I was typing this out, I couldn't work out the reasoning for not looking for the man, for looking for Edwin. Either way, his brother is obviously rather concerned, and they organise a search of the mountain. As this was his last known whereabouts, they would see if they could find any evidence of him having been there. And when I say they organised a search, about 200 people came out to look. And they looked...
a significant portion of the population of Arran.
So the population of Arran in, like, I looked it up in like 2000 and whenever the last census was, in like 2000 and something, was about 5,000 people. So... Yeah. I can't imagine in the 1890s, which I didn't look, I should have probably done, the populations would have been concentrated to the towns and some crofts. It wouldn't have been, not that Arran's much bigger than that now anyway, but it's pockets of population, and I can't imagine it would have added up to more than a couple of thousand.
No, probably not.
I don't know for a fact, but, a decent percentage of the island's population went out looking for this man. As you know, one way up, one way down. This time they kind of spread off the normal path. As they searched the surrounding area, they concentrated on Goatfell. And off the main path that we spoke about earlier on, the kind of way up, way down type path, they found a rather gruesome discovery just off the main path. They found the body of Edwin Rose, which was found under a boulder surrounded by a mini stone dike, which is a kind of wall that was built using the rocks that would have been in the area. And this had been built to obscure the view. His face was mangled. That's not my words, that's a description that was used in the papers from the time. And he didn't have any of his possessions on him. He was in an area that, as I say, wasn't an obvious retreat from the summer. It's not a place that you would naturally come down to. And I suppose it's worth saying at this point that, like, Goatfell, like any other mountain in Scotland, is sadly a dangerous place to be at times. So that people have fallen on Goatfell and lost their lives. And he was found in an area. I hate to use the word scree slope because when you look at the photos, it's certainly much bigger boulders than I would picture a scree slope being. But it was not. There was no definitive path the way he was going, or where he was found. Sorry. A few of his belongings were found in the nearby area, and the initial kind of summation of what had happened was he'd had a tragic fall, and Edwin Rose had died in that fall, landing under a boulder and then building a wall around himself.
Yeah,
obviously.
as you would.
It's the first thing I plan to do when I die is to build a wall.
But if you'd fallen, it's only 4 or 5 days since he was last seen alive. Yeah.
So yes, the search took place sometime around now. You're right, I should have this information. But he was due home on the 18th of July, which is 3 days after the event. And then it would have taken the time for his brother to travel north and organise a search. So let's go with a reasonable 5 or 6 days between potential fall and finding of body. You're right, though. That is a fact I should have looked up. Thanks, Al. Cheers.
Well, I was just thinking, with injuries that severe, if it was a fall, if it had been less than a week, unless there'd been severe rain, you'd expect to see evidence of that fall coming down the corrie of scree, in inverted commas.
Yeah. Sort of like a disturbance to it, or
a disturbance to it, blood stains leading down to the bottom.
So you're talking about on the mountain itself rather than on the victim.
Yeah.
So, yeah, none of this was seen. There was no evidence of a fall. There was also a man lying under a boulder that's got an overhang, and I'll share with you the picture in a minute. And he had a 42-stone dry stone dike built around him, which would take a wee while. So you can probably guess I'm not of the opinion that he fell down the hill. The outcome of the post-mortem that was carried out on Edwin showed that he had been beaten to death with something blunt, like a rock, maybe. The official verdict of the coroner was that a single blow to the head would have left him unconscious, and then several more blows would have killed him, before being dragged to be hidden from sight under the boulder, and then, of course, the mini wall being built as well. You'll not be surprised at all to hear that the police now wanted to speak with the last man that he had been seen with, the last man that was on the mountain with him.
John Laurie.
Who had, at this point, quit his day job and disappeared. So a search is set up to find John Laurie. He'd moved away from Glasgow and ended up in Liverpool, and even at one point wrote to the landlady of his lodgings in Glasgow saying that, and I quote, "Some people trying to get me into trouble, and I think you should give them no information at all, and I will prove to them how they are mistaken before long."
Wow, and he's also left a fairly lucrative job.
I mean, for his, a pattern maker at the ironworks wouldn't have been lowest of rung.
No,
He'd have been doing.
it's not. It's a skilled job.
Yes, it's still a skilled job in industry. He was. I don't think we can go as far to say as he was well off. He was certainly low middle society, maybe enough to go on holiday.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, enough to go to Arran.
And he just he's buggered off. And we know he was in Liverpool because once he's arrested, which surprise surprise will happen reasonably soon, he does say that he was travelling all around the UK before he was running out of money, basically. So obviously, it's taken a few days for the news to get out that the body had been found, not just because it was about 5 or 6 days before the body was found itself, but after that, there's obviously the time that it takes to put the news, the press release out, and that a body had been found on Goatfell. So there's a good week or so between them climbing the mountain and it hitting the press. John Laurie is essentially on the run at this point, and nobody has any idea where he is. And it carries on that way for 6 weeks. That's 6-ish weeks he's on the run. And for some reason, something changes on the 28th of August. He writes a letter to the Glasgow Herald saying, "I smiled when I read my arrest is expected hourly." This was postmarked from Aberdeen. I mean, it's a bold statement. You know, I certainly can't think of many people who wrote to the papers about their fleeing other than Jack the Ripper, or supposedly Jack the Ripper. But
Yeah, Jack the Ripper or the Riddler from Batman.
yeah, totally, man. And one of them's more real than the other, and I'll leave that with you. He's been buggering around the country, running away from whatever happened on Arran. And we'll go into that in a bit because he does get arrested and charged with the police, and his first response when he's arrested is quite interesting. It's literally a stroke of luck that leads to John Laurie's arrest on the 3rd of September, which is now, nearly 2 months after they've gone up, or 8 weeks-ish since they've gone up Goatfell. He was spotted boarding a train in a small town near Hamilton in Scotland. The police are informed, and a single police officer pursues him as he tries to evade arrest. In a scene not unlike Scooby-Doo, all of the locals come out and help with the chase, and he is chased into Bog Wood, where he hides in a bush.
Classic.
Oh yeah, it's properly like, write me a chase scene running through a town into a woods for a cartoon is exactly what's happened here. And he hides in this bush where he's spotted by a small boy, and the small boy goes, "He's over here," or something more Hamilton than that. Not Hamilton the musical, because I'm not singing it to you, but Hamilton the place. Very different things.
Yeah, I got
that. The officer that was chasing him shouted to him that he should come out now, and John replied that he would, other than the fact that he had just slit his own throat. Which was indeed true. He had, when he was pulled from his hiding place, he was found in possession of an open razor, and he had run it across his own neck, however, not deep enough to kill him. The police constable bandaged him up and arrested him. When he's charged with the offence of murder, John Laurie replies to them directly, "I robbed the man. I did not murder him." John Laurie was taken to trial in front of Lord Justice Clerk. And the case essentially revolved around, did Edwin fall or was he killed? Well, I think I know where I stand on this, but there was a defence put up against him. Or for him, sorry. And the defence was that he fell. Quite simply, the injuries that he sustained could and possibly would have been sustained as the result of a fall. And this was testified in court by several doctors. However, most importantly, none of these doctors ever actually examined the body of Edwin Rose. They were just given the facts and told, "What do you think?" And they said, yes, the injuries you described could have resulted as a fall. Well, they could have, except for a few extra things. Edwin Rose, when his body was found, was missing a few items. As I said, they were found near where his body was. There was his walking jacket, like his Mac, his Cagoule type jacket, was found near the body. As were a couple of his personal belongings. Nothing of expensive, funnily enough. But what he was wearing wasn't ripped. What he was wearing and what was found nearby weren't ripped, which, if you had sustained injuries resulting in death enough, falling down a ski slope on a Scottish mountain, your clothes would have been ripped as well.
You'd imagine they'd have been torn during the fall.
Absolutely, or caught on rocks or whatever, or possibly even, when somebody moves you, they might rip. But with the only exception of his shoulder and a part of his hip, I think, the clothing there were ripped, but the rest of it certainly wasn't the result of a fall. But the doctors themselves weren't wrong. All of those injuries could have been sustained by a fall. However, in this case, I don't believe they were. It took the jury just 45 minutes of deliberation to return with a guilty verdict, and John Laurie was sentenced to death. The court did say, he did say that he had not killed him, but he did rob him. A statement that he would carry for much longer than you may think, as the sentence was later changed to life imprisonment. He would serve 41 years in Perth prison, dying in 1930, all of the time protesting his innocence to murder. A few additional facts before we go any further? Or I have a few. Do you know what? I've got maybe 3 things that I've written down, like, at the end, as a kind of, these are things I was thinking about whilst writing it. But the basics of the case are, as I've said already, 2 men went out on a mountain and only 1 man came down. And we can only have the words of those people around him to say what actually happened. And that, to me, is that's the crux of this case. There's still a mystery to this day, technically, because the man protested his innocence all the way till his natural death. Well, natural death inside prison. And we can't say for sure that he killed him because there was only 2 men on that mountain.
No.
I fall quite clearly on one side.
Yeah. I think I agree with you, but I can also see why there could be reasonable doubt.
Yes.
And I have actually heard of this case before. I'm sure I read about it in a book that dealt with numerous possible miscarriages of justice. And I think, although he was, as you say, there was a guilty verdict, there was a majority of 1, wasn't it, for the jury? It wasn't a unanimous decision.
No, it wasn't a unanimous decision because the public were really, the public as well at large, and the newspapers and the press, the kind of representation of like normal people, if you know what I mean, were very, very split on what happened. This was a rich Englishman that had come up and had been attacked by, or had fell from, or had, there are so many ifs, ands, and buts that it had left. Yeah, the majority of the people split, and the jury. I knew it wasn't unanimous. I didn't think it was just 1, but you might be absolutely right there.
I think it was a majority of 1, and I like you, I'd fall on the he is guilty side 100%. But in a court of law, it has to be proved beyond reasonable doubt. Yeah,
and so one of the things I was going to say to you, just as we have this discussion, actually, if it's perfectly, is there's a few interesting things that weren't brought up in court that could have been used as evidence. The fact that John Laurie, all of his clothes when he was arrested, he obviously probably had everything he had on him because he'd been on the run for so long. None of the blood, there was no blood on any of his clothing. Like, there was no evidence of him having been involved in a crime scene, and there's no evidence. And I had a quick look because we've talked about cases where they've pawned their clothes and things like that before, and that's how they get caught. Almost as the slightly soiled stuff being pawned in. Can't see any evidence of that this time either. So, like, there is the argument that there's no physical evidence on him to prove his.
No, and there was no murder weapon recovered.
No, because if it was just a rock, it was a rock.
Yeah.
And you would never know. You throw it in a stream, or a mountain stream, and it's clean again, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, there is. I'd be very surprised if you didn't fall on the same theory as me, because nobody's building their own fucking stone dike around their body. As beautiful as the idea may be.
Yeah, that's true. 100%, yeah. But the jury, I think in this case, he never denied robbing him.
No, he didn't.
So John Laurie's story could have been that he fell, he died during the fall, I robbed him and moved his body to cover that.
So literally my next 3 lines, and I will read them verbatim to you, are: can you prove a push or a fall? Maybe he didn't kill him, but maybe he did. But somebody hid the body.
Yeah.
And you know, and these are just things I've literally written down at the end, and I find that a really interesting. You can't prove a push.
No, you can't.
That takes one man's. He has to verbalize that, or it's speculation the entire time.
Or you couldn't prove a push back then, anyway. In that case,
I don't know if you'd be.
You can now with. It has been done. There was a case not long ago in Scotland up on the Arthur's Seat.
Yes, you're right, and we've talked about this briefly. That I've kind of filmed bits and pieces with the family that were involved in that, and yes, you can. Yes, sorry, you can prove a push now, and certainly in that circumstance, you can. But yeah, in the mountains, can you, like in the proper mountains, can you prove a push?
No. No, when there's just 2 people there, those 2 people are the only people who are going to know what really happened. And if one of them's dead, that means only one person's ever going to know what really happened.
Exactly, yeah. I'd like to give you one other fact about the case that I thought would actually tickle you more than anything. You maybe seen, if you've read about this case ever so slightly, you maybe see this, but I'd like to talk about Edwin Rose's boots. Edwin Rose's boots weren't on his body when they did the examination of him. The coroner and the police were asked about this in the courtroom, and they were very reluctant to disclose the location of his boots. They were asked by the Lord Chief Justice to basically, tell me now where the boots are in a court of law. And they said, all right, we will do. We'll tell you where they are. They're buried at the high water mark. And why? Because of island folklore. It is said that if a man is killed on Arran and his boots are not buried at the high water mark, then his ghost would roam the hills for eternity.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
I thought, do you know what? I wrote, whatever 3,000 words that is or whatever, and I was like, Ali's going to like the last 10 of them.
No, yeah, I really like that.
So yes, that's the thing. Apparently, if you die on the Isle of Arran, your boots have to be, or maybe if you are killed on the Isle of Arran, your boots must be buried at the high water mark, and then your ghost can be set free. I thought you'd enjoy the island folklore there.
I do. I love island folklore.
And then I'll show you this. We'll not include this in the podcast, but then Poppy made me write Hoppy, Bloppy, Floppy, Stotty, Dobby, Poppy.
Oh,
at the bottom,
nice.
at the bottom of my notes. So yeah, that is the case of I'm going with the Goatfell murder because I prefer it as a title to the Arran mystery.
No, Goatfell murder is wonderful. The name Goatfell actually comes from the Gaelic for mountain of wind.
The mountain of wind.
Yeah.
It's not what I would have thought it would have been. It's also a weird mountain to talk about because most of the mountains in Scotland are Ben something or more Gaelic than Goatfell. I mean, I presume it is Gaelic,
Yeah, it is Gaelic.
but it doesn't
Although
sound as Gaelic.
Fell, spelled Feld, is Norse for peak or cliff as well.
Very good. It's one that there are apparently still tours run by local history tour guides on Arran that will take you to the boulder where Edwin Rose was
Yeah.
found. The Drystone Dyke is obviously not there because they had to take that down to take the body out. But the overhanging boulder, which I will share a picture. In fact, if you've got, I can probably send you a picture right now. In fact, you can probably just Google it. Edwin Rose Boulder. Yeah, there's people, and do you know, it's the sort of thing I would probably take a wander up to if I was ever on Arran again.
Yeah.
But that is me, got my mountain mystery out of me for a while, and I shall go on and find something different next time.
It is a good one. It's a tough one. It must have been a hard one for a jury to try. I think because of the lack of hard evidence, I think probably what really condemned him was his behavior and his acts following the crime.
So what you mean, like the writing the letters and the quitting his job and going on the run?
Yeah, exactly. The going on the run, the quitting his job, the writing the letters. If he'd gone down that mountain and instantly said, John has fallen.
Yeah, if he'd instantly admitted.
Oh, yeah.
If he'd instantly admitted.
This was a picture of the boulder.
Yeah, there you go. Even if he did kill him, let's go down that route. Even if he did, if he'd gone down the hill and gone, Edwin Rose has just fallen, I moved him so we would know where to find him, then he'd have never gone to jail.
Yeah, I agree. He'd have got away with it.
Arguably, he would never have gone to jail because, as you say, there was no physical evidence against him to say you done it, other than the erratic behaviour that goes with it.
That's the most damning.
Yeah, to me, the most damning is the attempt to take your own life. He did say, when he was being cross-examined and interviewed by the police, that he'd attempted to take his own life on more than one occasion whilst on the run. He'd taken poison a couple of times and been sick, but never die. Obviously, he never died because they caught him. But you know what I mean? Like he'd had failed attempts to poison himself. He should have spoken to the teacup murderer. He could have sorted it out for him.
Yeah, instantly.
So, yeah. But is that an admission of guilt? Or is he just running away because he's known he's robbed them? And then the guy's been found dead? You know, just putting that out there.
Would you run that far?
Yeah, true. That's a very good question. Probably not, no.
It's a lot of running for a robbery.
Yeah. Unless it's a robbery that's ended up in a death. Rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
Do you know if he's tried to rob him on the mountain and then he's fallen or slipped during the robbery, you know, you've still caused it, but, you know, it's not beating a man's head in with a rock.
Yeah. It's not premeditative murder.
We are also skipping over the fact that the coroner basically said it couldn't have been a fall. Although the doctors that said the injuries could have been sustained by a fall, the physical evidence of the body itself didn't lend itself to a fall. You know, the lack of ripped clothing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then John didn't have any blood on him, so yeah, you have to go both ways, don't you?
It's an interesting one. I definitely fall on the guilty side on this one, though.
Me too, absolutely. Yeah, I don't have no doubt, but I'm fairly certain he was responsible for the death of Edwin Rose, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you know what intrigued me about it was that I'd actually done a weird Google on like Scottish island mysteries, and of course the one that comes up all the time is the Peter Gibbs in Mull, and then this one was like 2 pages down on the old Google. I was like, what's that? Turns out friends of ours have covered this case once before, and I listened to them today. So Emma and Jill Ann from Murder She Spoke had covered this a
Yeah.
while ago as a listener
Oh.
request. And Emma did the research, which it was a really interesting listen because her family go over to Arran every year, so she kind of knows the place way better than me. And it's always nice to hear one of your friends. So I didn't know they had before I'd written it, so hands up. they can have. But if you want another version of the telling, go and listen to Murder She Spoke. They are very good friends of the podcast.
Yeah, they're very good.
Yeah, it's a weird one because I found, like I say, I found it just looking up mysteries on Scottish Islands, and there's other ones I'm going to go and cover, but this one grabbed me because it was a mountain, and actually not a mountain I've been up, but I for some reason assumed you had anyway without even asking you. So, there we go.
It's a good one. I kind of want to go back up Goatfell now.
Take some photos if you do, man. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Next time you're up, let's go to Arran. It's not that far away. A couple of hours we can be there.
Yeah. Sarah wants to go to Arran.
Oh, well, let's do it.
I don't want to climb it.
She doesn't want to climb a mountain, though.
There's a beautiful spa on Arran.
Oh, lovely, that'll do.
Loch and
I have a
Ranny.
question, Bob.
Yes.
What is the question?
Bob, did you have any previous? Do you know that the other case that's on Arthur's seat that we won't talk about too much because it's quite modern? Really, it wasn't. They didn't prove he pushed her. What they proved was he wasn't a very nice person. They were capable of doing it, didn't they?
That's right, yeah.
So did this other bloke
So John
have
Laurie,
any sort of past?
it's really interesting because his employer described him as a decent chap. And he certainly didn't seem like there's certainly nothing in his past that said he was already a robber or a violent man. He was clearly a bit weird because he went to stalk his ex-girlfriend on an island under a pseudonym. Not a very good pseudonym. He just changed his surname, but he certainly, I suppose, no is the answer to that, Sarah, because like there certainly wasn't a criminal record for him.
No good. Yeah. It's really interesting.
It makes it even stranger almost that he has no previous on it at all, and he's obviously had a moment of rage, whether it's been the toothache or whatever it was that made him snap on that mountain. Something's happened, but it baffles my head, which is
Do
why
we know if he actually contacted the ex-girlfriend on Arran during his trip?
No. I don't think his plan was to ever contact the ex-girlfriend. I think his plan was to go there and spy on her. And then he formed this weird boy band with these three other guys that were like, let's be pals. There's a lot of weirdness about him, but I don't know if there's nothing criminal about him previously that's led to a murder and a robbery and a running away. Which is possibly why he was, tempted to take his own life at times, because he's panicked at something. Or maybe Edwin did fall. Maybe Edwin did fall, but he was there. Yeah, exactly. And it's one of these things we will never know. The last person that knew died in 1930. I'm going to try and keep that
story,
in somehow. So I'm just going to keep your question in, I'm afraid.
That's fine.
I think they ask it.
And that is the case of the Goatfell mystery. Alistair, I probably leave you more baffled this evening than you started.
Yes. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm more conflicted about that case than I was when we started, because as I said, I knew about it already, but not in that much detail.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm more conflicted than before.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
It's the best I can do for you. We'll be back again with another tale. Possibly recording in person next time, I believe. Are you up again soon?
Next week? I doubt it. No,
not next week. We'll be on the old interweb next week again.
Yeah, Bob will be loving it.
Is it you? Are we just going back to week about now, even though you took that big stint in the middle?
Yeah.
You sure? Sound with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you chose to do it. Anyway, we shall
It's true.
leave you with a thank you, love you, bye.
Thank you. Love you. Bye.
Thank you, bye. I can hear myself. Thank you, bye.